rivers. Summary. Discipleship is a process of correcting our lives to be more like Jesus. I don't know how it is in your case, but I have had significant learnings from my mistakes, which are even quickly incorporated into my cognitive repertoire. For example, one of the most experiential learning experiences I have had was when on one occasion, my brothers and I, when we were very young, had the opportunity to take a bus trip from Indiana to Maryland in the United States. The bus made several stops along the way. I remember that it was almost 2 in the morning that we arrived at a certain station and they gave us the opportunity to get off. For a few minutes, my brother and I got off the bus and saw something that was not very common at that time in our country. We saw a coin vending machine for drinks. At that moment we craved a cola drink, which came in a presentation, also not common in Merida in those days. A canned cola drink. The drinks you bought in those days in Merida in cans were juices or dairy products that required shaking before opening. So, following that same pattern, when we had our canned cola in our hands, we shook it as was customary and then opened it. You can imagine the result. Although it was 2 in the morning, we did not go unnoticed at that station. The mistakes we make can be magnificent opportunities for correction, learning and growth. This month we are talking about the master strategy that Jesus Christ used to train his disciples in such a way that the gospel would spread following that same pattern. He formed disciples who made more disciples, and in this way, the gospel has reached you and me, who are thousands of kilometers and hundreds of years from where and when he started all this. 861. So the strategy of Jesus is truly a master strategy that we must continue as disciples of Christ. Christ called disciples, Christ modeled the gospel to his disciples, Christ trained his disciples, and today we add one more element of Christ's strategy. He corrected his disciples. Correcting disciples' mistakes is an important part of the discipleship process. That is why this day we say, discipleship is a process of correcting our lives to be more like Jesus. Discipleship becomes necessary because our lives require correction. So a requirement to be a disciple of Christ is to have a heart humble enough to recognize our need to be corrected. Discipleship is like a pencil. When you have a pencil in your hands, what does the pencil have on one end and what does it have on the other? At one end it has graphite, and at the other end an eraser or eraser. The pencil, from the outset, in its very essence, assumes that you are going to make mistakes, and that is why you have the right tool to correct your mistakes. Thus discipleship, in its very essence, assumes that we need to be corrected. The starting point when you begin discipleship is our bankruptcy, our need, our lack of perfection, our urgency to be corrected. And it is there that the transforming grace of the gospel operates its most glorious transformation. Because discipleship is a process of correcting our lives to be more like Jesus. Those we know today as the apostles were not always what they became. Jesus spent a lot of time focused on them and had many moments and opportunities to correct them so that each day they would become more like his teacher. And this process of correction is very noticeable in many passages, but particularly in the passage that concerns us today in the Gospel of Luke. Chapter 9, 46-56. In this passage, Jesus, correcting his disciples, taught them, and teaches us, 3 great truths about what it means to be a disciple of Christ, because discipleship is a process of correcting our lives to become more and more like Jesus. First, Jesus clarifies and corrects our errors by teaching us that being a disciple is not about being the greatest, but the least. Luke 9:46 says, an argument arose among the disciples about which of them would be the most important. To give a little context, what had just happened in the sequence of events is that they had witnessed the transfiguration of Jesus, they had faced their failure in not being able to cast the demon out of a boy, and Jesus had to